If Detective Robert Chase hadn't stopped for that German shepherd sitting motionless in the September heat, 19 children would still be trapped in the darkness beneath 1247 Sycamore Drive. The dog's amber eyes locked onto his cruiser like radar, not the desperate pleading of a stray, but something else entirely, something that made Chase's 15 years of police instinct scream danger. The shepherd sat statue still despite the 102-degree California sun, positioned directly across from the abandoned house like a sentinel who'd forgotten his orders ended months ago. No panting, no seeking shade. Just that unwavering stare at the boarded windows and the kind of focus Chase had only seen in working dogs with a mission. 3 missing children cases in 6 months, all within 2 miles of this spot. All while this dog maintained his impossible vigil. Chase cut the engine, his hand hesitating on the door handle. In his gut, he knew whatever that dog was guarding would change everything. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Detective Robert Chase had been patrolling Riverside County for 15 years, but he'd never encountered anything quite like this. At 42, his weathered face carried the lines of too many late nights and cold coffee, the kind of wear that came from chasing leads that went nowhere and knocking on doors that stayed closed. His divorce 3 years earlier had left him with an empty apartment, a stack of unpaid bills, and the growing realization that he'd traded everything meaningful for a badge and a pension he might never live to collect. The Meadowbrook subdivision sprawled across what used to be orange groves, its cookie-cutter houses painted in desert pastels that baked under the relentless California sun. Population 8,500, mostly young families drawn by affordable mortgages and decent schools. It should have been the kind of place where the worst crime was teenagers spray-painting stop signs. Instead, it had become ground zero for something that made Chase's stomach turn every time he thought about it. 5 children had vanished in the past 6 months. Not runaways. These were good kids from stable homes who simply disappeared between school and dinner time. Emma Rodriguez, age 7, last seen walking home from Maple Elementary. Kevin Thompson, 9, who never made it back from his friend's house 3 blocks away. Sarah Chen, 8. Who vanished from her own front yard while her mother grabbed the mail. The FBI had been called in after the 3rd disappearance, but their behavioral analysis unit had found no pattern, no connection, no viable leads. The German shepherd sitting across from 1247 Sycamore Drive was roughly 4 years old, Chase estimated, though malnutrition made it difficult to be certain. His coat, once probably a rich sable brown, had faded to a dusty gray-brown that spoke of too many nights sleeping rough. Ribs showed beneath matted fur, and a scar ran along his left hind leg, old, healed, but telling a story of violence or accident. Yet despite his obvious neglect, the dog's posture remained regal, alert, purposeful. The house he guarded had been empty for 14 months, ever since the bank foreclosed on the Harrison family property. Built in 1987, it was a 2-story colonial with faded blue shutters and a front porch that sagged under the weight of accumulated neglect. Neighborhood kids claimed it was haunted, parents used it as shorthand for what happened when you didn't pay your mortgage, and real estate agents had stopped showing it after the 3rd break-in left the interior stripped of anything valuable. Chase had driven past this corner hundreds of times over the past year. He was certain he'd never seen the dog before today. German shepherds weren't exactly invisible. This was a breed that commanded attention, especially one showing signs of professional training. The way he sat, the alertness in his amber eyes, the way his ears tracked sounds while his gaze never left the house. This wasn't just a stray seeking shelter. This was a working dog who'd found his assignment and refused to abandon his post. Chase cut the engine and stepped out into the afternoon heat, the asphalt already soft beneath his boots. The shepherd's ears twitched at the sound of the car door, but his gaze never wavered from the house. No tail wag, no approach. just acknowledgement that he'd been noticed. "Hey there, buddy," Chase called softly, keeping his distance. 15 years of police work had taught him to read body language, and this dog's posture screamed caution. Not fear, something deeper, like he was guarding something precious and couldn't afford to be distracted. The radio crackled to life on his shoulder. "Unit 247, what's your status on that suspicious activity call?" Chase keyed the mic, his eyes still on the dog. "False alarm. Dispatch. Just a stray. I'll handle it." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. This wasn't a stray. The way the shepherd sat, perfectly straight, weight evenly distributed, ears at precise attention, this was military bearing. Chase had worked with K9 units before. He recognized professional training when he saw it. He approached slowly, noting how the dog tracked his movement without turning his head. When Chase got within 10 feet, the shepherd finally looked at him directly. The intelligence in those amber eyes was startling. This wasn't the vacant stare of an abandoned animal. This was assessment, calculation, and something that looked remarkably like frustration. "What are you looking at, boy?" Chase followed the dog's gaze to the house. From this angle, he could see that the front door had been pried open recently. The splintered wood around the frame was fresh, bright yellow against the weathered gray siding. "How long have you been sitting here?" The dog whined once, low and urgent, then returned his attention to the house. Chase pulled out his phone and called the county assessor's office. While he waited on hold, he studied the property more carefully. The yard was overgrown with tumbleweeds and brittle grass, the kind of desolation that comes from months of neglect. But there were tire tracks in the dirt driveway, recent ones from something heavier than a car, a van maybe, or a truck. "Assessor's office, this is Janet." "This is Detective Chase, Riverside County Sheriff. I need information on 1247 Sycamore Drive in Meadowbrook. It shows as foreclosed, but I need to know if anyone has legal access." "Let me check." The sound of typing filled the brief silence. "That property belongs to the Harrison Family Trust. Foreclosure was finalized 13 months ago. No legal occupants listed." "Who handles the trust?" "According to our records, it's managed by a Thomas Brennan. Would you like his contact information?" Chase scribbled down the number, thanked Janet, and hung up. The name Thomas Brennan didn't ring any bells, but something about the Harrison property felt familiar. He'd have to check the case files when he got back to the station. The dog hadn't moved. If anything, his focus had intensified. Chase noticed that the animal's breathing was shallow, controlled, the kind of restraint that came from extensive training. This was a working dog trying to communicate something urgent. Chase walked a slow perimeter around the property, the shepherd's eyes tracking his movement. At the back of the house, he found something that made his pulse quicken. A child's bicycle, partially hidden under a tarp behind the detached garage. Pink and white, with streamers hanging from the handlebars and a small basket decorated with cartoon flowers. He photographed it with his phone, then called dispatch again. "This is Chase. I need you to run a check on all missing children cases in the past 6 months. Specifically looking for any connection to a pink bicycle with white trim." "Copy that, 247. Stand by." While he waited, Chase returned to the front of the house. The shepherd was still in position, but now there was something different in his posture. His tail, which had been motionless, gave the faintest wag when he saw Chase returning. Not the enthusiastic greeting of a pet, but the acknowledgement of what? Partnership. "You found something back there, didn't you?" Chase said quietly. "And you've been trying to tell someone for God knows how long." The radio crackled. "Unit 247, dispatch. We've got a match on that bicycle. Sarah Chen was riding a pink Huffy with white trim and basket when she disappeared 6 weeks ago. Her parents confirmed the description." Chase felt his chest tighten. Sarah Chen, 8 years old, vanished from her front yard while her mother stepped inside for 30 seconds to grab the mail. The FBI had canvassed a 6-block radius and found nothing. No witnesses, no physical evidence, no leads, except for a German Shepherd who'd been sitting vigil across from an abandoned house, trying to tell anyone who would listen that something was terribly wrong. Chase looked at the dog with new understanding. "You know where she is, don't you?" Chase spent the next hour walking the perimeter of the property with methodical precision, photographing everything that seemed out of place. The dog, he'd started thinking of him as Max, though he had no idea if that was the animal's real name, remained at his post, but tracked Chase's every movement with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. By 6 o'clock, the September heat had begun to fade, and Chase made a decision that would have seemed insane to him that morning. He drove to the nearest pet store and bought a bag of premium dog food, a water bowl, and a small first aid kit. When he returned to Sycamore Drive, Max was exactly where he'd left him. "Look, buddy," Chase said, setting the bowl down and filling it with water from a bottle. "I don't know what you think you're guarding, but you're going to die of dehydration if you keep this up." Max glanced at the water, then back at the house. The conflict was visible in his posture, thirst warring with duty. Finally, he stood and drank deeply, but returned immediately to his sitting position. Chase poured out a portion of kibble. This time, Max didn't hesitate. He ate quickly, efficiently, like a soldier taking rations during a brief pause in patrol. When he finished, he sat back down and resumed his vigil. "You're military trained, aren't you?" Chase said, settling onto the curb a few feet away. "Or police. Someone taught you to maintain position no matter what." At the word position, Max's ears pricked forward slightly. Chase felt a chill despite the warm evening air. This dog understood commands, professional commands. Chase's phone rang. Detective Sarah Walsh, his partner of 3 years. "Where the hell are you, Chase? You missed the briefing on the Chen case." "I'm following up on something. What did the feds have to say?" "Same old bureaucratic bullshit. They're expanding the search radius to include the next county over." "Think our guy might be mobile, hitting different areas?" Walsh paused. "You sound weird. What kind of follow-up?" Chase looked at Max, who was watching him intently. "I found something. A bicycle that matches Sarah Chen's description. It's at the Harrison place on Sycamore. The foreclosed house. That place has been empty for over a year." "That's what I thought too. But someone's been here recently. Fresh tire tracks, forced entry on the front door." Chase hesitated. "And there's a dog here. German Shepherd. He's been sitting outside this house for God knows how long, like he's guarding something." "Jesus, Chase. It's a stray dog and an abandoned bicycle. Kids dump bikes everywhere." "This isn't just any dog, Sarah. This animal has professional training, and he's specifically fixated on this house." Walsh was quiet for a long moment. "You're starting to sound like my ex-husband when he went off his meds. It's a dog, Robert." "Dogs don't solve crimes." "Then explain to me why a trained German Shepherd would camp outside the same house where I found evidence connected to a missing child." "Coincidence. Look, I get it. We're all frustrated with this case, but you can't start seeing connections that aren't there." After Walsh hung up, Chase sat in the gathering dusk feeling more alone than he had in months. Max hadn't moved during the entire conversation, but somehow Chase sensed the dog's attention had been focused on every word. "She thinks I'm losing it," Chase said quietly. "Maybe I am." Max turned his head and looked directly at Chase for the first time since that afternoon. The expression in those amber eyes was unmistakably sympathetic. Then, slowly and deliberately, Max stood up and walked toward the house. Chase followed, his heart rate increasing. Max stopped at the front door and sniffed along the frame where it had been pried open. Then he moved to the left side of the porch and began pawing at a specific spot in the dirt. "What is it, boy?" Max looked up at Chase, then back at the spot, and pawed again. More insistently this time. Chase knelt and brushed away the loose dirt. His fingers found something hard and smooth. Plastic. He worked it free and held it up to the fading light. It was a child's hair clip, pink and purple, shaped like a butterfly. Chase's hands were shaking as he called Walsh back. "What now, Chase?" "I need you to contact the Chen family. Ask them if Sarah was wearing any hair accessories when she disappeared." "Why would—" "Just do it. Please." 10 minutes later, Walsh called back. Her voice was different now, careful and focused. "Sarah's mother says she was wearing 2 butterfly clips, pink and purple, her favorites." Chase looked down at the clip in his palm, then at Max, who was sitting at attention beside the spot where they'd found it. "Sarah, this changes things. I need a crime scene unit here, and I need a search warrant for this property. You think the dog led you to evidence?" Chase watched Max return to his original position across from the house, resuming his patient vigil. "I think this dog knows something we don't, and I think he's been trying to tell someone for weeks." "I'll make the calls," Walsh said. "But Chase, if this turns out to be nothing—" "It's not nothing." Chase was surprised by the certainty in his own voice. This dog isn't guarding an empty house. He's guarding a crime scene. As the last light faded from the sky, Chase sat on the curb beside Max and waited for backup to arrive. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel like he was working alone. The crime scene unit arrived at dawn on Wednesday, their white van cutting through the morning mist that clung to the Meadowbrook subdivision. Chase had spent the night in his cruiser, dozing fitfully while Max maintained his unwavering vigil. The dog hadn't moved once during the long hours of darkness, sitting statue still as if carved from stone. Detective Sarah Walsh emerged from the passenger seat of the van, her red hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and her expression skeptical. Behind her came Officer Martinez from the K9 unit, his German Shepherd Rex on a tight leash. The moment Rex saw Max, both dogs went rigid with recognition. "Well, I'll be damned," Martinez muttered. "That's a trained dog if I ever saw one." Max's posture shifted slightly as the official K9 approached, but he didn't abandon his position. Instead, he gave a low whine that sounded almost like a briefing between partners. "You know what that means?" Martinez asked, watching the interaction between the 2 shepherds. "That's K9 communication. Your stray is trying to tell Rex what he's found." Walsh shot Chase a look that was part apology, part concern. "Maybe you weren't as crazy as I thought." The search warrant had come through at 5 a.m. thanks to the hair clip and the mounting pressure from 5 missing children cases. Captain Morrison had authorized a full forensics team, though Chase could tell from his tone over the phone that the captain still considered this a long shot. As the team began setting up their equipment, Chase approached Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the veterinarian he'd called to examine Max. She'd agreed to come as a favor, intrigued by Chase's description of the dog's behavior. "How long would you estimate he's been out here?" Chase asked, watching as Dr. Hendricks gently examined Max without moving him from his position. "Based on his condition, I'd say 6 to 8 weeks minimum. He's dehydrated and undernourished, but not critically so. Someone's been feeding him occasionally." She ran her hands along Max's ribs, checking for injuries. "This is interesting. He's been trained not to break position, even for basic needs. That's military-level discipline." "Military? Or high-level police work? See this scar on his left hind leg? That's from a training accident or possibly combat. And look at this." She lifted Max's left ear, revealing a small tattoo. "K9 2847. He's definitely a working dog." Walsh had been listening to the conversation while coordinating with the crime scene techs. "Can you trace that number?" "I can try," Dr. Hendricks said. "Canine registration databases are usually military or law enforcement. Give me a few hours." The forensics team had finished their exterior sweep and was preparing to enter the house when Max suddenly stood up. For the first time since Chase had found him, the dog moved from his position, but instead of approaching the house, he trotted around to the back of the property. "Follow him," Chase called to the team. "He's trying to show us something." Max led them to a spot behind the detached garage where the ground looked different, slightly sunken, as if it had been disturbed and refilled. The dog sat down and gave a sharp bark, then looked directly at Chase with an expression that clearly said, "Here. This is what you need to find." The forensics photographer documented everything while two technicians began carefully excavating the area with small shovels and brushes. 18 inches down, they found a metal box wrapped in plastic. Inside were personal items from all 5 missing children: Emma Rodriguez's school ID, Kevin Thompson's baseball card, Sarah Chen's other butterfly clip, a small toy car belonging to Marcus Williams, and a friendship bracelet from Lily Patterson. "Jesus Christ," Walsh whispered. "He's been sitting on a trophy cache." But Max wasn't finished. As the team processed the evidence, he moved to another spot near the back fence and repeated his alert behavior. This location yielded another buried container with more personal items and something that made Chase's blood run cold: Polaroid photographs of children in what appeared to be a basement or underground room. By noon, the property had been declared an active crime scene. Captain Morrison arrived with FBI Special Agent Jennifer Torres, who'd been working the missing children cases. Torres was a small, intense woman in her 40s who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Detective Chase," she said, approaching where he sat with Max. "I understand we have an unusual witness." "More like a partner," Chase replied. "He's been trying to tell us about this for weeks. We just weren't listening." Agent Torres knelt down and studied Max carefully. "I've worked with canine units for 15 years. This dog's behavior is textbook alert posture, but he's not responding to a handler. He's working independently. Dr. Hendricks thinks he's military or police trained. I've put in a call to the DOD Canine Registry. If he's military, we'll know by tonight." Torres stood and looked toward the house. "The real question is whether he's alerting on the building itself or something underneath it." As if summoned by her words, Max rose and walked purposefully toward the house's front porch. He stopped at a specific spot near the foundation and began pawing at the ground, just as he had when he'd led Chase to the hair clip. Officer Martinez brought Rex over to confirm the alert. The official K9 immediately went into search mode, sniffing the area where Max had indicated. Within minutes, Rex sat down in the classic alert position. "Both dogs are hitting on the same spot," Martinez confirmed. "There's definitely something down there." The forensics team used ground-penetrating radar to scan the area. The results showed a void beneath the foundation, a space that shouldn't exist according to the original building plans. "There's a room under there," the lead technician announced. "Maybe 8 by 12 feet, approximately 6 feet below ground level." Chase felt his stomach drop. A hidden room beneath an abandoned house, personal items from missing children buried in the yard, and a trained dog who'd been trying to alert authorities for weeks. "We need to find the entrance," Agent Torres said grimly. Max had already moved again, this time to a bulkhead door on the side of the house that was partially obscured by overgrown bushes. The door was secured with a heavy padlock, but the metal showed signs of recent use. No rust, no weather damage. "This is it," Chase said, his voice tight with emotion. "This is what he's been guarding." As the team prepared to cut through the lock, Dr. Hendricks approached with news about Max's identification. "I found him in the military database," she said, holding up a printout. "His name is Max, and he belonged to Staff Sergeant Michael Torres. Agent Torres? Any relation? Agent Torres went pale. Michael is my brother. He was deployed to Afghanistan 18 months ago. His unit was attacked, and he was listed as MIA. According to these records, Max was trained for search and rescue operations. When Sergeant Torres was reported missing, Max was supposed to be relocated to another handler, but he disappeared from the base before the transfer could be completed. Chase looked at Max with new understanding. How did he get here? How did he know to come to this specific location? I don't know, Agent Torres said quietly. But Michael always said Max was the smartest dog he'd ever worked with. If there were children in trouble, Max would find them. The lock gave way with a metallic snap, and the bulkhead door creaked open to reveal wooden steps descending into darkness. The smell that emerged was stale and humid, with an undertone that made everyone present step back instinctively. Max positioned himself at the top of the stairs and gave a low, urgent whine. His body language had changed from alert to deeply distressed, as if he knew what they were about to find, but had been powerless to prevent it. I'm going down first, Chase said, pulling on latex gloves and activating his flashlight. Like hell you are, Agent Torres replied. This is a federal case now. FBI goes first. But Max had already made the decision for them. The dog descended the stairs with careful, deliberate steps, looking back to ensure the humans were following. At the bottom, he led them through a short corridor to a heavy wooden door. The door was unlocked. Beyond it lay a room that would haunt Chase's dreams for years to come. It was set up like a makeshift dormitory with 5 small beds arranged along the walls. Each bed had a thin mattress, a single blanket, and a pillow. Personal belongings were neatly arranged on wooden crates that served as nightstands. Books, small toys, articles of clothing. But the beds were empty. The room was clean, organized, and completely abandoned. Where are they? Walsh whispered. Max moved to the far end of the room and pawed at what appeared to be a solid wall. Closer inspection revealed another concealed door, this one leading to a natural cave system that extended deeper into the hillside. The children aren't here, Agent Torres said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. But they were recently. Chase knelt beside Max and scratched behind his ears. You've been guarding an empty nest, haven't you, boy? Trying to tell us where they used to be. Max's tail wagged once, slowly, and he looked toward the cave entrance with an expression that seemed to say, they went that way. Find them. As the forensics team began processing the underground room, Agent Torres received a call that changed everything. A K-9 unit in the next county had discovered a similar setup at another abandoned property, but this one wasn't empty. They found them, she announced. All 5 children, alive and unharmed. The perpetrator is in custody. Chase felt his knees nearly give out with relief. Because of Max? Because of Max, Torres confirmed. If he hadn't led you here, we never would have made the connection. This was just one location in a larger operation. Max seemed to understand that his mission was complete. For the first time in weeks, he relaxed his rigid posture and allowed himself to lean against Chase's leg. The trust in that simple gesture was overwhelming. What happens to him now? Chase asked. Agent Torres was quiet for a long moment. Officially, he's still military property, but given the circumstances and the fact that his original handler is MIA, she looked at the bond that had formed between Chase and Max. I think we can arrange something. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only follows a storm. Chase had barely slept, his mind replaying every detail of the past 4 days. Max had spent the night on the floor beside Chase's bed, closer than he'd ever allowed himself to be, as if the completion of his mission had finally permitted him to lower his guard. The call came at 6:47 a.m. Agent Torres, her voice tight with urgency. We have a problem, Chase. Thomas Brennan, the man we arrested at the second location, he's not talking. Won't give us any information about other sites, other children who might still be missing, but he keeps asking about a dog. Chase felt his blood chill. What kind of questions? Specific ones. He wants to know if we found a German Shepherd at the Sycamore Drive location. When we confirmed it, he smiled. First time he's shown any emotion since we brought him in. Chase looked down at Max, who was alert now, sensing the tension in the conversation. What does that mean? I don't know, but I'm driving out to you now. Brennan says he'll only talk if the dog is present. He claims they have history. An hour later, Chase stood in the parking lot of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, Max at his side, waiting for the convoy that would transport Thomas Brennan from federal custody. The man they brought in handcuffs and leg shackles was not what Chase had expected. Brennan was 45, average height, with the kind of forgettable face that would blend into any crowd. But his eyes held a calculating intelligence that made Chase's skin crawl. When those eyes landed on Max, they lit up with something that looked disturbingly like affection. "Hello, Max," Brennan said softly, as the guards positioned him in the interrogation room. "I wondered when you'd find your way home." Max's entire body went rigid. A low growl started deep in his chest, building to a rumble that filled the small room. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth that Chase had never seen him bare before. "You know this animal?" Agent Torres asked. "Know him?" Brennan laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "I trained him. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres was my partner in Afghanistan. When Michael was killed, and yes, he is dead, no matter what your missing persons report says, Max became my responsibility." Chase felt the world tilt. "Your military?" "Was discharged after Michael's death for emotional instability. Apparently, losing your best friend to an IED and having to put down his wounded dog isn't considered normal grief by Army psychiatrists." "Put down?" Dr. Hendricks spoke for the first time, her voice sharp with outrage. "Max is very much alive." Brennan's smile was predatory. "I tried 3 times. Pills, drowning, even put a gun to his head. But Max here is too smart for his own good, kept escaping, kept surviving. So I decided to put his skills to better use." The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Chase leaned forward in his chair. "You used him to find the children. Max has the finest nose in California for tracking scared kids. I'd give him a piece of clothing, point him in the right direction, and he'd lead me straight to them. Playgrounds, schools, neighborhoods where children walked alone. He was very efficient." Agent Torres had gone pale. "You're saying this dog helped you kidnap children?" "I'm saying this dog did what he was trained to do, follow orders. The fact that he didn't understand the full scope of the mission isn't his fault." Max's growling had intensified, and Chase could feel the animal's muscles bunching beneath his hand. But there was something else in Max's posture now: shame. The dog understood enough of the conversation to know he was being accused of complicity in something terrible. "That's why you abandoned him at the house," Chase said, understanding flooding through him. "You knew he'd alert authorities eventually." "Max has a flaw," Brennan continued conversationally. "He's loyal to the mission, not the handler. Once he realized what I was really doing with the children I'd had him find, he started resisting, refusing commands, trying to lead the children away instead of toward me. I knew it was only a matter of time before he'd find a way to expose the operation." "So you left him there as a witness?" "I left him there as insurance. Max would never abandon children in danger. As long as he was guarding that location, no one would look too hard at the other sites. He was my unwitting distraction." Chase felt sick. "You manipulated his loyalty, used his training against him. I used his nature. Max is a protector. It's what he was bred and trained to be. The fact that his protection would ultimately lead to my capture was acceptable. I was tired, Detective Chase. Tired of running. Tired of the voices in my head. Tired of seeing Michael's face every time I closed my eyes. Agent Torres leaned back in her chair, studying Brennan with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. You're saying you wanted to be caught? I'm saying Max and I both served our purposes. He protected those children the only way he knew how, and I made sure there was a trail for someone like you to follow. The photographs, the personal items, the obvious burial sites, did you really think someone intelligent enough to run a multi-location operation for 6 months would be that careless? The interrogation continued for 3 hours, with Brennan providing locations of 2 additional sites and details about a network of abandoned properties throughout Southern California. But Chase found himself unable to focus on the tactical information. His attention was fixed on Max, who had gradually relaxed his aggressive posture but remained vigilant, watching Brennan with the intensity of a guard protecting something precious. During a break in questioning, Chase stepped outside with Max. The afternoon sun was brutal, but both of them needed air that didn't carry the taint of Brennan's presence. "None of this was your fault," Chase said quietly, kneeling beside the dog. "You understand that, right? He perverted your training, used your instincts against you." Max looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Chase could swear he saw understanding there. And forgiveness, not for Brennan, but for himself. Dr. Hendricks joined them in the parking lot, her expression troubled. "I've been thinking about what Brennan said, about trying to kill Max 3 times. What about it? Look at this scar pattern on his left leg. It's not from a training accident. It's from a bullet wound. This dog was shot and survived. The psychological trauma from that, combined with losing his original handler, Max has been through hell." Chase scratched behind Max's ears, feeling the dog lean into the touch. But he kept going, kept doing his job. "Not his original job," Dr. Hendricks corrected. "He evolved. Instead of finding children for Brennan, he started protecting them. Instead of following orders blindly, he started thinking for himself. That's not just intelligence. That's moral courage." When they returned to the interrogation room, Brennan was finishing his statement. He'd provided detailed information about his methods, his locations, and his network of contacts. But as the guards prepared to escort him back to his cell, he turned to Max one final time. "You were the best partner I ever had," he said, his voice carrying genuine regret. "If Michael could see what you've become, what you've accomplished, he'd be proud." Max's response was to turn his back on Brennan completely, positioning himself between the man and Chase. The message was clear. His loyalty had found a new home. Agent Torres gathered her files and prepared to leave. "The paperwork for Max's transfer will take a few weeks, but it's just a formality. As far as the military is concerned, he died with his handler in Afghanistan. What happens to him now is up to you." Chase looked down at Max, who was sitting at perfect attention, waiting for his next assignment. "What do you say, partner? Ready for a new kind of police work?" Max's tail wagged once, slowly, and Chase knew they'd found each other at exactly the right time. Both of them had been lost. Both had been searching for a purpose that seemed to slip away just when they thought they'd grasped it. But sometimes the best partnerships aren't planned. Sometimes they're forged in the space between what's been lost and what's waiting to be found. As they walked toward Chase's cruiser, Max maintained his position at Chase's left side, the traditional heel position for a working dog, but there was something different in his bearing now. The desperate vigilance had been replaced by confident alertness. He was no longer guarding the past. He was ready for whatever came next. The emergency call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October, 3 weeks after Brennan's arrest. Chase bolted upright in bed, Max already at attention beside him, sensing the urgency before the phone even finished ringing. "We've got a situation." Captain Morrison's voice was tight with stress. "The Patterson girl, Lily's younger sister Emma, she's missing. Taken from her bedroom window sometime after midnight. Parents found a note." Chase was already pulling on his clothes, Max pacing by the door. "What kind of note?" "Says if we want her back, we bring Max to the old Brennan property on Riverside Road. Alone. By dawn." The words hit Chase like a physical blow. "That's impossible. Brennan's in federal custody." "I know. But someone out there knows about Max's involvement in the case. Either we've got a copycat or Brennan had a partner we missed." Chase clipped Max's collar and headed for the door. "I'm on my way." "Chase, wait. This has trap written all over it." We can't not. If there's a chance Emma Patterson is alive, we have to try." The drive to the Patterson house took 12 minutes through empty streets. Max sat rigid in the passenger seat, his training evident in the way he prepared himself for action. When they arrived, the scene was controlled chaos. FBI agents, local police, and a forensics team processing the girl's bedroom. Agent Torres met them at the curb. The window was cut, not broken. Professional work. No signs of struggle inside the room, which suggests Emma knew her attacker or was threatened into compliance. Any connection to Brennan? That's what's troubling. The handwriting on the note matches samples from Brennan's journal, but it's impossible. He's been in solitary confinement since his arrest. No outside contact except his lawyer. Chase studied the note through the evidence bag. The message was brief and chilling. "The dog knows where she is. Bring him to 1847 Riverside Road. Dawn. Come alone or she dies." "Riverside Road," Chase murmured. "That's not far from the original site." "It's another property in the Harrison Family Trust," Torres confirmed. "We ran a full search of all their holdings after Brennan's arrest, but this one came up clean. Empty for 2 years, no signs of recent activity." Max had been unusually restless during their conversation, pacing in tight circles and whining softly. When Chase knelt beside him, the dog's attention was fixed on something beyond the crowd of investigators. "What is it, boy?" Max trotted to the edge of the property line and sat down hard, assuming his classic alert position. But instead of staring at a building, he was focused on a panel van parked across the street. The van was old, nondescript, with tinted windows and license plates that were too dirty to read clearly. "Torres," Chase called quietly, "how long has that van been there?" Agent Torres followed his gaze and immediately keyed her radio. "I need a license check on a white panel van northbound side of Maple Street." She paused, listening to the response. "Plates are stolen. Reported missing 3 days ago." Before anyone could react, the van's engine roared to life. As it pulled away from the curb, the passenger window rolled down and a hand emerged, dropping something onto the asphalt. Then the van disappeared around the corner, moving too fast for anyone to follow. The object was another note, this one written on different paper, but in the same handwriting. "The dog remembers. He knows the way. Don't disappoint me again, Robert." "Again?" Torres looked at Chase with confusion. "What does that mean?" Chase felt ice forming in his stomach. "I don't know. But whoever this is, they know my name. They know about Max. And they've been watching us." Dr. Hendricks arrived 20 minutes later to examine Max, who had become increasingly agitated since the van's departure. His behavior was unlike anything Chase had seen, pacing, whining, and repeatedly returning to the spot where the van had been parked. "His stress indicators are off the charts," Dr. Hendricks reported. "Heart rate elevated, excessive panting, classic signs of recognition anxiety. This dog has encountered this person before, and the experience was traumatic." More traumatic than what he went through with Brennan? Different kind of trauma. Brennan was his handler. There was a relationship there, even a twisted one. This feels like genuine fear. As dawn approached, Chase found himself facing an impossible decision. Every protocol demanded backup, surveillance, tactical support. But the note had been explicit. Come alone, or Emma Patterson dies. Max solved the dilemma by walking to Chase's cruiser and sitting by the passenger door, looking back with an expression that clearly said, "We're wasting time." "You're not going alone," Torres said firmly. "I don't care what the note says." "Then Emma dies." Chase opened the car door for Max, who jumped in without hesitation. "You can follow at a distance, but if this person sees backup, we lose her." The drive to Riverside Road took them through the industrial outskirts of the county, where abandoned warehouses and empty lots stretched toward the foothills. 1847. Riverside Road turned out to be a derelict auto repair shop, its bay doors hanging open like broken teeth. Max was out of the car before Chase had fully stopped, but instead of approaching the building, he circled behind it, nose to the ground, following a scent trail only he could detect. Chase followed, his service weapon drawn but held low. The trail led to a storm drain that had been modified with a steel grate and heavy lock. Fresh scratches around the lock mechanism indicated recent use. The sound that emerged from the drain made Chase's blood freeze. A child's voice, weak and frightened. "Help me." "Please help me." "Emma?" Chase called down. "Emma Patterson?" "Yes, I'm here. The bad man said you'd come." Max was already pawing at the lock, his agitation extreme. Chase examined the mechanism and realized it required a key, but as he looked closer, he noticed something that made his heart race. The lock was identical to the ones Brennan had used at his other sites. "Emma, I'm going to get you out." "Are you hurt?" "I'm scared. It's dark, and there's water down here. The man said if I screamed, he'd hurt my sister too." Chase was working on the lock when he heard footsteps behind him. He spun around to find a figure emerging from the shadows of the auto shop. The man was tall, gaunt, wearing a maintenance uniform that had seen better days. "Hello, Detective Chase. I've been looking forward to this reunion." Chase kept his weapon trained on the man while trying to place the face. There was something familiar about the angular features and the cold, calculating eyes. "Do I know you?" The man smiled, revealing teeth stained yellow from years of smoking. "Not directly. But Max does, don't you, boy?" Max's response was immediate and violent. The dog launched himself at the stranger with a ferocity Chase had never witnessed, all training forgotten in favor of pure, protective rage. The man raised his arm to defend himself, and Chase saw the long scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. Recognition hit him like a lightning bolt. This was the person who had tried to kill Max 3 times, and now he had come back to finish the job. The collision between Max and the stranger sent both of them tumbling to the ground in a chaos of snarling fury and human screams. Chase kept his weapon trained on the struggle, unable to get a clear shot as the two figures rolled dangerously close to the storm drain opening. "Max, off! Off!" Chase commanded, but the dog was beyond hearing. This wasn't the controlled aggression of police training. This was primal, desperate violence born from recognition and terror. The stranger managed to kick Max away and scrambled to his feet, revealing a face that Chase now remembered from the case files. Harold Peterson, former Army medic, dishonorably discharged for drug theft and psychological instability, Brennan's bunkmate during their final months of service. "You should have left him dead," Peterson snarled, blood streaming from deep scratches on his arms. "I did you a favor trying to put that animal out of his misery. You're the one who tried to kill Max. 3 times. Pills didn't work. He threw them up, tried to drown him in the reservoir, but the bastard could swim better than I thought. Even put my service pistol to his head, but I couldn't pull the trigger. Always was too soft for the hard decisions." Max had regained his footing and was circling Peterson with predatory focus, lips pulled back in a silent snarl that promised death. But there was something else in the dog's posture, a trembling that spoke of deep psychological trauma. This man represented his worst nightmare, made flesh. "Why?" Chase asked, keeping both his weapon and his attention divided between Peterson and the storm drain where Emma Patterson waited. "Why try to kill him at all?" "Because he knew." Peterson's voice cracked with years of suppressed rage. "After Michael died, after that IED turned my best friend into hamburger, Max wouldn't let it go, kept whining, kept searching, kept trying to dig Michael out of a grave that was already 6 feet under. The dog wouldn't accept that Michael was gone. So you tried to reunite them. I tried to give him peace. But then Brennan got involved, said he could use Max's training for his projects. Said it would give the dog purpose again." Peterson laughed bitterly. "Purpose? Like kidnapping children was some kind of therapy." Chase felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "You were Brennan's partner from the beginning. I was Brennan's cleanup crew. Someone had to handle the logistics while he played mastermind. Someone had to keep Max in line when he started getting too smart for his own good." From the storm drain came Emma's frightened voice. "Please, mister, I'm cold. The water's getting higher." Peterson smiled at the sound, and Chase saw madness glittering in his eyes. "You want to save her? Put down the gun and call off your dog. We're going to have ourselves a proper reunion. Let the girl go. Your fight is with me and Max. My fight is with the universe that took Michael and left me with nothing but nightmares and a dog who reminded me every day of what I'd lost." Peterson reached behind his back and produced a pistol, military issue, well-maintained despite its age. "But you're right about one thing. This ends with Max." The standoff stretched across several heartbeats. Chase could hear water gurgling in the storm drain, which meant Peterson had rigged some kind of flooding mechanism. Emma's time was running out, but any move Chase made would trigger violence that could leave them all dead. Max made the decision for them. The dog launched himself not at Peterson, but at the storm drain grate, his claws scrabbling desperately at the metal barrier separating him from the trapped child. It was the same protective instinct that had kept him sitting vigil for weeks, the same loyalty that had driven him to expose Brennan's operation despite the personal cost. Peterson raised his weapon toward Max's exposed back, and Chase had no choice but to fire. The shot took Peterson in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his pistol skittering across the asphalt. But the impact also triggered something else. A loud mechanical grinding from beneath the ground as hidden pumps began forcing water into the storm drain system at an accelerated rate. "The key!" Peterson gasped, clutching his wounded shoulder. "You need the key to stop the pumps!" Chase kept his weapon trained on Peterson while Max continued his frantic assault on the drain grate. The lock was heavy-duty military surplus, designed to withstand exactly this kind of damage. Without the key, Emma would drown within minutes. "Where is it?" Peterson's smile was triumphant despite his pain. "Same place it's always been. Same place I put it after I locked Michael's dog tags down there 3 years ago." The revelation hit Chase like a physical blow. "You buried Michael's remains in the storm drain system. What was left of them? Army couldn't find enough pieces for a proper burial, so I brought him home myself. Michael, his gear, his dog tags, everything that mattered. Max used to sit here for hours, just like he did at that house, because he could smell Michael down there. Chase understood now why Max had been so agitated at this location, why his behavior had shifted from alert to desperate. The dog wasn't just trying to save Emma Patterson, he was trying to reach his original handler, the man whose death had started this entire nightmare. "The key, Peterson, where is it?" "Check my pockets when I'm dead," Peterson whispered, then reached for a concealed backup weapon. Chase fired twice, center mass, ending Peterson's threat permanently. But even as he knelt to search the body, he could hear Emma's terrified sobs mixing with the sound of rising water. The key wasn't in Peterson's pockets. It wasn't in his vehicle. And time was running out. Max had exhausted himself trying to break through the grate and was now sitting beside it, whining with the kind of heartbreak that transcended species. Chase realized the dog understood that he was trapped between saving Emma and honoring his loyalty to Michael, two impossible choices that defined his entire existence. Then Chase noticed something that made his heart race. Max wasn't just whining randomly, he was using the specific cadence that K-9 units employed for complex communication. 3 short whines, 2 long ones, repeated in a pattern. Chase had worked with enough K-9 teams to recognize Morse code training. Max was spelling something. D-I-G. "You want me to dig?" "Where?" Max trotted to a spot about 10 feet from the drain opening and began pawing at the ground with renewed energy. The soil here was looser, more recently disturbed. Chase grabbed a tire iron from Peterson's vehicle and began excavating, following Max's increasingly excited guidance. 18 inches down, his improvised shovel struck metal, a small waterproof container, the kind used by military units for sensitive equipment. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were Michael Torres's dog tags, a silver key, and a photograph of a young soldier with his arm around a German Shepherd puppy. Max saw the photograph and gave a sound Chase had never heard from him before, something between a whine and a sigh that seemed to carry 3 years of grief and recognition. "I know, buddy," Chase said softly, pocketing the photo, "but we've got work to do." The key fit the storm drain lock perfectly. Chase wrenched open the grate and climbed down into the rapidly filling drainage tunnel, Max close behind him. The water was chest deep and rising, but Emma Patterson was still alive, clinging to a metal ladder mounted on the tunnel wall. "I've got you!" Chase called, wrapping his arms around the terrified 8-year-old. "Max, up! Up!" The dog scrambled up the ladder ahead of them, providing a psychological anchor for Emma as Chase lifted her toward safety. By the time they emerged from the tunnel, Agent Torres and a full tactical team had arrived, having followed the sound of gunshots. As paramedics checked Emma for hypothermia and shock, Chase sat on the ground beside Max, both of them soaked and exhausted. The dog was holding Michael's dog tags gently in his mouth, not chewing or playing, but carrying them like the sacred trust they represented. 3 years, Chase said quietly. "You've been mourning for 3 years, haven't you?" Max looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Chase saw something he'd never noticed before. Beneath the loyalty, beneath the training, beneath the unwavering dedication to duty, there was simply a dog who missed his best friend and had never been allowed to say goodbye. "We're going to fix that," Chase promised. "All of it, starting right now." The revelation of Michael Torres's remains changed everything about the case. Agent Torres arranged for a proper military burial, with Max serving as honor guard for the ceremony. The photograph from the container was enlarged and placed beside the casket, showing Michael and Max during happier times, before war and loss and betrayal had torn their world apart. But as they stood at the graveside, watching honor guards fold the American flag with ceremonial precision, Chase realized that Max's story wasn't ending, it was finally beginning. For 3 years, the dog had been trapped between loyalty to the dead and duty to the living. Now, with Michael properly honored and Emma safely home, Max was free to choose his own path forward. He chose to stay with Chase. 6 months later, Detective Robert Chase stood in his backyard watching Max play with a tennis ball that had seen better days. The dog's weight was back to a healthy 74 pounds, his coat gleaming with proper nutrition and care, but more importantly, the haunted look had finally left his amber eyes. The transformation hadn't been instant. For weeks after Michael's burial, Max had struggled with nightmares, whimpering in his sleep and waking with the kind of start that spoke of battlefield memories. Dr. Hendricks had warned Chase that trauma recovery in working dogs could take months, possibly years. But slowly, day by day, Max had begun to trust that his new life was permanent. The official adoption papers had come through in March, along with Max's certification as an active member of the Riverside County Sheriff's K-9 unit. Captain Morrison had been skeptical at first. Taking on a dog with Max's psychological history was a liability the department didn't need. But the successful resolution of the Patterson case had made Max something of a local celebrity, and public pressure had helped push the paperwork through. Their first official case together had been a missing hiker in the San Bernardino Mountains. Max had found the lost woman in 4 hours, tracking her scent through terrain that would have taken search teams days to cover. The second case was a home invasion where the perpetrator had fled on foot. Max tracked him for 3 miles through suburban neighborhoods and found him hiding in a storm drain, a location that might have triggered traumatic memories but instead demonstrated how far he'd come in his recovery. "You've got visitors," Sarah Walsh called from the back porch, gesturing toward the front of the house. Chase rounded the corner to find Emma Patterson and her older sister Lily standing on his front steps, their parents waiting by the family car. Emma clutched a hand-drawn picture that she thrust toward Chase the moment she saw him. "I made this for Max," she announced with the confident authority of an 8-year-old who'd survived something that would have broken many adults. "It's him saving me from the scary water." The drawing was rendered in crayon with the kind of artistic enthusiasm that only children possessed. Max was depicted as an enormous German shepherd with cape-like ears, standing guard over a much smaller figure labeled Emma in purple letters. Above them both, a sun smiled down with the caption, "My Hero Max," written in careful block letters. "He'll love it," Chase said, kneeling to Emma's eye level. "How are you doing, kiddo?" "Good. The dreams don't come as much anymore. Mom says that's because the bad men can't hurt anyone now." She looked past Chase toward the backyard where Max had appeared, tennis ball forgotten. "Can I pet him?" Of course. The reunion between Emma and Max was gentle, careful, full of the kind of mutual recognition that transcends species. Max sat perfectly still while Emma wrapped her small arms around his neck, whispering something in his ear that Chase couldn't hear but suspected was a thank you that came straight from her heart. Lily Patterson, now 12 and carrying herself with the protective awareness of an older sister who'd nearly lost everything, approached more cautiously. "Detective Chase, my mom wanted me to ask, are there other kids out there? Other places like where Emma was kept?" Chase exchanged a look with Emma's parents over the girl's head. The question was fair and deserved an honest answer. "We don't think so, sweetheart. Agent Torres and her team checked every property, every connection. They found 3 other sites, but they were all empty. No more children, no more bad guys." "But if there were," Lily pressed, "Max would find them, right?" Chase watched Max sitting patiently while Emma drew invisible patterns in his fur with her finger. The dog's attention was completely focused on the child, his body language relaxed but alert, protective without being possessive. "Yes," Chase said quietly. If there were more children who needed help, Max would find them. That's what he does. "Good," Lily said with satisfaction, "because kids shouldn't have to be scared." After 37 years together, Robert and Max retired from active duty on the same day. Max was 9 years old, still healthy, still sharp, but showing the gray muzzle that comes with a life well lived. Robert was 55, his knees creaking from too many chases and his heart full of memories that would last several lifetimes. They moved to a small house in the mountains where Max could chase rabbits without endangering suspects, and Robert could drink his morning coffee without checking for emergency calls. The walls were covered with commendations, newspaper clippings, and children's drawings, thank you notes from families whose lives they'd touched over the years. Emma Patterson, now 14, still sent birthday cards. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department had named their new canine training facility the Max and Michael Memorial Center. Agent Torres visited twice a year, always bringing stories about cases solved using techniques Max had pioneered. But the best moments were the quiet ones. Max stretched out by the fireplace, Robert reading the newspaper, both of them content in the knowledge that they'd found exactly what they'd been searching for all along. Not just purpose, not just partnership, but home. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the ones that let you sleep peacefully, knowing you've made a difference. In our golden years, many of us wonder if our lives truly mattered, if the sacrifices we made, the work we did, the love we gave, actually changed anything. Robert and Max's story reminds us that loyalty, courage, and the willingness to help others create ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Every act of kindness, every moment we choose to pay attention instead of looking away, every time we trust our instincts to help someone in need, these choices define our legacy. What moment in your life are you most proud of when you chose to help someone despite the risk or inconvenience? Do you believe that the relationships we build, whether with family, friends, or even our faithful pets, are what give our lives true meaning?